Hello, greetings listeners, and welcome to Roll Off a Tangent, episode 29. My name is Nikita Zuev, and tonight I'm once again joined by my co-host, XJ and Robert Gibson. This time we shall be traveling into dystopian world, or worlds, so to speak, of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. For our first delve into the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, we have chosen two kinds of fool. A short story written by the Scottish author of Graham McNeill. And Graham is one of my favorite authors in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, and I was the one who suggested this whole thing. So whether my co-hosts like this or not, now rests within the universe's hands, and I can only tragically watch as to what will happen next. I shall now reveal the plot in its entirety to the story. So if you wish to read it for yourself, stop the podcast now and rejoin us after you've done so, because I think we'll have a lot to say. Well, at least, I can only promise I'll have a lot to say about it. We open up with a military operation conducted by Cato Sicarius, the captain of the second company of the Ultramarines. Each Space Marine chapter, which Ultramarines are part of, have 10 chapters, and the second chapter, and this 10 companies, and the second company is sort of like you're almost as good as the veterans, but not quite as good. He and his ilk are bioengineered warriors of the Imperium of Man who hold the line against Xeno threat, as well as other things like demons, and we get to see a little bit of that in the story. In this particular instance, the Ultramarines are clearing out an ancient ship adrift in the void, a space hulk named Final Absolution. Infested with an alien species called Tyranids, this vessel threatens the entire nearby system of Talasar, which our protagonist hails from, Cato Sicarius. Meanwhile, someone else is also within our story, another captain of the Ultramarines, Captain Ackerman, and his men of the first company, so the veterans, the best of the best, are aboard of Valen's Revenge, another ship, itching to be deployed. These men are one step above regular Space Marines. They are all powerful warriors. They wear special Terminator armor that provides much greater protection and firepower. They discuss the current mission, how Captain Sicarius has changed his ways in some way, and became more by the book, more akin to the Codex Astartes, the thing that they hold dear, and the big point of contention against Ultramarines by other people who enjoy Warhammer. They think they are a little bit too vanilla, too by the book, right? The first company wants to serve the Emperor this day, and they are granted this wish as the Tyranid hive awakens within the ship, within the bowels of the engine. They teleport with their Terminator armor at once. Sicarius and his tech marine Orion are trying to restart the engines on the bridge to push the space hull out of the star system, and on the other side of the ship, the first company arrives to join the fight. We're next treated to back and forth cuts between points of view in the action of Ultramarines, both the first and the second company, as they work together in order to end the threat. The story culminates with the first company of the Ultramarines fighting the Hive Tyrant of the Great Devourer, destroying the creature and overcoming the threat itself. The two captains reconcile after the mission, reminiscing how this time they switched roles and became each other's mirrors images during their cooperative assault against the Xeno incursion. And that's the story. All right. So, Robert, what did you think about Two Kinds of Fool?
My main aim in this podcast is not to lose any friends.
All right, so you didn't like it. All right, go on. What's the issue with it?
I've got an excuse, which is that my mentality is at the moment is not Warhammer compatible.
Okay.
Now that doesn't mean that I haven't got anything positive to say. I'm not going.
But
this is the boot is on the other leg as far as if you compare this podcast with the one about Robert Heinlein's They, because just as I reckon Nikki couldn't read that story properly, so I reckon I couldn't read this story properly. So I'm going to practice what I preach. And instead of saying that there's this, that, and the other wrong with the story, I'm going to say there's this, that, and the other that I'd better confess that is wrong with the way I read it. And I've got quite a lot to say about this, including, but I mean, perhaps better hear what XJ has got to say about the story itself, because what I've got to say is mostly about techniques of reading, which are applicable to this story, but they're not going to be as directly relevant as no doubt what XJ's got to say. I would like to say, though, that supposing I put my empathy into trying to understand what's going on when someone reads this story who does like it, I think it's probably a case of a continual commentary, a sort of semi-conscious commentary that's going on in the person of the appreciative reader's mind, so as to adjust the story to make it bearable. I think that's probably going on the whole time. It's a bit like, I don't know, if you're sitting in church, I'm a churchgoer, listening to a sermon that's full of things that other people might not appreciate. Maybe it's not very good, but with a bit of ingenuity, you can make continual adjustments to make it good in your mind. Now, you might say, well, if the story needs that much help, then it can't be that good. But I'm not going to argue that way. I'm going to say that there must be something in this story that inspires a lot of intelligent readers to make the effort to be able to read it. So in that sense, it's to the writer's credit that this is so. But these are very deep waters. So
okay.
I'll pass on to maybe to XJ and see what he thinks about it.
Before you totally destroy the piece, right? Okay, I'll go on XJ.
So actually, like Rob, this is my first Warhammer story. Yeah, so I know of Warhammer's reputation, and I've seen the art design. I'm more drawn towards the art than I am to the written stories, just because that's where I come from. Every once in a while, when I still had too much time to burn, I would nerd out and read the Wikipedia and stuff like that. So I kind of have a grasp of the Warhammer universe and its reputation and the style and just like the overall lore. So that's it. This story is a very well written story. There is a lot to admire from my point of view as a writer myself. There's a lot to admire in the story. It is written in a very easy to read manner. It's also a very difficult to read story. Why is it difficult? Clearly, this story is not a beginner's entry into the Warhammer universe. There's a lot of jargon dropped into it, and it's assumed that, I think the intention is assumed that the reader already knows what a Tyranid is. I'm gonna have to refer to the story on my phone. It goes into a little bit about the Emperor on the Golden Throne. I'm mixing it up with Dune in my mind for some reason. And then so that who are the Tyranids? Who are the Marines, and what's the difference between a normal Marine and
a Terminator?
And a Terminator, and then what's the difference between that and a Imperator?
Imperial Knight, you mean?
Imperial Knight, the one that's supposed to be enormously big.
Are these genuine questions, or are you just listing like your questions that you had when you were reading it?
There were questions that came up in my mind when I was reading it. I'm like, what, who, what, when, where, why? Furthermore, and there are some really strange stuff that made it a fairly difficult slog, and that is so the Marines they served the Emperor for 1,000 years.
More than 1,000 sometimes.
More than 1,000, and then some of the there was one description, I don't remember where it is, but it was talking about one of the Tyranids they found, or one of the enemies they found in the bowels when the hive mind awoke, right? And they say it's a very primal thing, centuries old, perhaps 1,000 years even. And I'm thinking to myself, man, these Marines are as primal as as these Tyranids. And I'm thinking to myself, how did they come to be that old? And all of those lore, right? They're not. It's definitely not beginner friendly, if you know what I'm trying to get at.
For sure. Actually, I would agree with every single Warhammer story being like this. So when I was young, I don't know how I would feel about it today as a 26-year-old man, but when I was very young, having all these questions actually made me want to find out, like, okay, how can a Space Marine live 100 years? So a Space Marine is a genetically engineered creature. He's not really a man anymore. He literally has like this huge like crab-like chitin that is implanted at the back of his his entire body. He has 2 hearts. He has like 3 stomachs. He has an acid gland here, which means that even if he is completely disabled, he can still like make saliva made of acid to throw at his enemies. His cultural inductions within the brain have been enhanced so that he can have better peripheral vision than any animal in the world. They are not people anymore. They are these creatures. They are the angels of death, as they are called in some of the stories. Right? And you would never find this out for reading this 12-page story, or however long it was. But the point is, it makes you ask all these questions, and if your mind is willing to go with it and willing to be like, yeah, but what are you, and how does this work? What's a Tyranid, right? Back when I was younger, Google wasn't really a prominent thing. So what I used to do is I'd go to a game shop where I bought those books, and I would be like, show me a Tyranid, and they would show me like a miniature, and I'd be like, oh my god, that's disgusting, I will love it, like, or how does a Space Marine look like, they'd have a miniature for that, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it is, I would say that Two Kinds of Fool is the most like nonchalant friendly of all lore dumps that I've ever seen, because most of them are even worse. They just start you in the middle and they're like, all right, figure it out, man. Figure out what a Space Marine is.
I've got something to say there, which is this is actually not the first Warhammer story I've read.
Oh my god, I'm even more backwards than Rob is.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. I've read a Warhammer novel, no less, by Barrington Bailey called Eye of Terror. And oddly enough, I didn't find any difficulty in understanding it at all. It was very clear, too clear, in fact. It was about the most, well, not quite the most depressing book I've ever read, but, well, no, I would say, yeah, the most depressing book I've ever read. But it's brilliant. It's totally brilliant. I would recommend it to you chaps. I'm sure you'd lap it up. It's like a nightmare, but it's very easy to read. And the only reason I read it was because Barrington Bailey is one of my favorite authors.
There is another aspect as to why I picked Two Kinds of Fools, because this story is not that pessimistic. because like the good guys, quote unquote. I mean, there's no good guys in Warhammer, okay? But our protagonists, the humans, don't, you know, like they win. They suffer minimal. They suffer minimal casualties. They take care of the threat.
Humans by name only, according to you.
Well, yes. So that I wanted to get there. So they basically. So the reason they are engineered this way, which I think is a very interesting aspect of the world, is that they are created by you know, all right, first there was the Emperor, and then he created 20 sons. And those 20 sons then created these Space Marines, each of their own legion. And then they separated even further, but I mean, that doesn't matter at this moment. The point was that they made those things, they made these super warriors in order to like carry the burden of protecting humanity. From the world of Warhammer, because the world of Warhammer is so terrible that you literally need a super mega human to just survive in a battle. And if you're just a normal guy in the Warhammer 40k and you've been sent out as an Imperial Guard and you gotta fight, the chances that you'll survive are so low that there's no pension. That's not a thing, really. You get drafted and that's about it, and you just stay in there and that's your life. You get rations, you know, like you get to shower. That's enough, right? There's no such thing as pension. That's not really a thing in the world. It doesn't exist.
Yeah. So what you're implying, Nikki, is that there is something in that universe that's worth defending.
Yeah. Well, it is. So this is the beauty of the whole thing, right? As I said to you previously, out of podcast, and I'll make this point, and we have to talk about the actual story because we're all just talking about the universe. Is the fact that because everything is so bleak and things don't go well at all most times, the few moments when they do, those little sparks of light, they are so bright and so much brighter than something in a work which is constantly happy or doesn't have as many downs. Because when you are in a world such as Warhammer and something beautiful and genuine happens, you're taken aback. You're like, so humanity still does exist in a little speck of dust, but it still exists. There's still this ignition that could happen, and that's what that's what makes you want to continue. That's what makes you want to fight on.
Right, got it. Yeah. Yeah, and what does the word Warhammer actually mean?
Okay, so we're never going to talk about two kinds of fool. So Warhammer as a word used to be the name for the fantasy setting, which Games Workshop had created, and it was called Warhammer because there was war and there was hammers. And the original name for this universe, the universe of Warhammer 40,000, was Rogue Trader. And it was called Rogue Trader because the first edition focused in some way on merchants that would travel through space in this world, the only people who had any autonomy, basically, in the world of space, in Warhammer. And they were called rogue traders, and they were the ones who were like bringing civilization to other places. And the reason they named it Warhammer 40,000 was because they were releasing a different game which also had rogue in it or trader in it or something like that, and they were like, we need to come up with a better, like, more distinct name than release two games at the same time that have the same name. So I guess we'll call Warhammer 40,000 because they copied all the evil gods from Warhammer Fantasy to this setting at some point. Anyway, well, it's kind of meaningless. 40,000 means it's 40,000 years in the future. Warhammer is meaningless as a word, to be honest. I'll be killed after saying that, but that's what it is. So two kinds of fool, right? Okay, so
what? Are we going back to two kinds of fool already?
Yeah, we have to. That's what this podcast is gonna be. They're gonna be like, they talked about Warhammer. They didn't even say anything about that.
Well, I mean, so I think it's. I feel like we have an excuse since we built it into the name of the podcast itself.
That's true. We do roll off a tangent for sure all the time. So, to me, Graham McNeill, and I encourage you to give him a chance in his other works, more long. Running works, more than a novella, like a little novella like this one, because he really shines in a novel form. right? In my opinion, I really like the story. I don't have that much bad to say about it, but I recognize that because I've read like 7, 8, or 8 of his books, and let me tell you, every time I've read a novel of his, cream of the crop. Uh, Fantastic. The storytelling is superb, and you can really see change in characters as you go on. Here, you don't see that much of that, and I mean, it's only 12 pages, so I didn't expect that much, anyways. Although Robert E. Howard, I mean, he would have done something with 12 pages, but not everybody is Robert E. Howard. Graham, I still love you. You're still amazing. All right, please don't kill me. So, as always,
well, he won't cast any runes on you for sure.
That's true. That's an old reference. The writing style is amazing, immaculate. Let me give you. Usually, Robert does this, but today I'm gonna share with you the thing, one of the passages. The Lord of the Broods loosed the bellow that shook the walls of the chamber, and Agamemnon met its alien gaze. Its eyes were ancient, marbled orbs the size of his fist. Agamemnon saw the silence between the galaxies and their empty, soulless voids. He felt sudden, agonizing pressure within his skull, the presence of something invasive and hideously alien pressing against the surface of his mind. And in that instant of connection, he was once again in Castra Tangara, as the demon lore towering above him, its warp-sheathed claws poised to end his life. He felt the numbing horror of that moment again, paralyzed, knowing that there was absolutely nothing he could do to save himself. Brilliant, beautiful, fantastically written. Especially the empty, soulless voids. Great, love it. I can really imagine this crazy thing. As far as the story itself goes, there seems to be a parallel between Sicarius and Agamemnon, these two captains, and how they kind of switch roles in this moment, right? Like Sicarius has become more by the book, tries to do everything by the book, and then Agamemnon takes a risk and itches on into battle like Sicarius usually would, right? That's at least what we're led to believe by the 12 pages, and that they get to understand each other's perspective. And at the end realize that sometimes you just have to do things differently. You don't have to constantly be one way or the other. You can actually be a human being, which I think is a very big revelation for a space marine, because they're not really human anymore. So them having this human connection in the end was very interesting to see. I like what the author tries to do here. It's very interesting. However, I do think that the story suffers from being too quick on the draw. Very tries to go as fast as possible, and we don't get to spend that much time with Sicarius. Actually, we spend most time with Agamemnon, which I didn't expect, because I expected there would be more back and forth, more cuts between these two things, because that's what Mr. McNeill is very good at, cutting two scenes together in a sequence, right? So it's sad to see that wasn't happening more in the story. So anyway, Robert, how much did you hate it and why?
You see, I like mustard on my food, but I wouldn't be able to eat a whole plate of mustard. Now, in a way, to me, the kind of action that this author goes in for is like mustard. What you want is it to season a sort of a plate full of what's mainly suspense and a sense of place. I mean, there is a sense of place in a way, sort of the insides of spaceships and all that. I'm trying not to be too negative about all this, but
why not? Be negative if that's what you feel in your heart. Yeah, that's what you should.
I just want to read a few. I want to try and eliminate my bias by doing a sort of sampling technique. A sort of gore sampling the gore. Now, going through each page in turn, just getting a few samples. Page 2, we've got Sicarius met the Tyranid charge head-on. He went low, ducking under a slashing claw the length of a scythe, and he thrust his tempest blaze into the creature's thorax and twisted its energized edge. Molten flesh and black-red ichor frothed over his gauntlet. All right. And then the next page, we've got alien bodies burned with a curious snapping sound like fresh kindling on a bonfire. Bolter shells detonated hormagaunts like chitinous bladders, their noxious blood spattering the wall in vast quantities.
Awesome.
And then after that, we have a relatively quiet 3 pages. All right. It's true that on page 4 we have... excuse me.
Here we go.
On page 4 we have the wet smack of cold steel.
Turn the thread is not over, Robert. Sorry, go ahead.
But page 5 we have no gore at all. Page 6 we only have numerous holes punctured the walls of the bridge, ancient ingress points ripped by attacking bioorganisms. So that's description really rather than action. But then we have 5 gore spattered pages in a row. Pages 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So, for example, page 7, we've got a monster erupted from the pool, a worm-like beast with serrated fangs and a rippling underbelly of sucking tubes. Agamemnon's storm bolter roared and the thing exploded into wet scraps of meat and chitinous exo-armor. All right, and there's a lot more of that sort of thing. And on page 8, we have lethally fast killers with claws easily capable of tearing through even the thickest armor plates. They screeched and hissed, jamming the corridor with their bodies. He fought with them, crushing broken alien limbs like refuse beneath his boot. On page 9, we have a flailing creature erupted from the floor pit to envelop him. Its body was a segmented snake-like horror of rending claws and snapping fangs.
We might have to age restrict this.
Yeah, no. Every single description you give, Robert, sounds like an awesome metal cover for like any band. Awesome. Like, honestly, every description of this, I put my name behind. They're awesome. But I understand what you're saying. Okay, yeah, go on.
Page 10, we have the corrosive slime ate into his helm's grill, and Agamemnon gagged at its foulness. So on about necrotic flesh and so on. And page 11 we have the monstrous creature spasmed in the pool. I quite like spasmed actually, sending a wave of stinking fluids over the undulating deck. Its swollen belly bloated with hideous tumorous growths. Blah 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 blah. Scores ruptured, spilling a froth of grotesque fetal scraps onto the chamber's floor. They writhed like unclenching fists, blah, 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 blah. So, any one of those as seasoning would be pretty good. It's just that I think it just is a little bit repetitive. Not in the words.
Well, come on, hold on. It's not. It's. You know what's repetitive? What's it called? God, Beyond the Black River description of people getting killed. That's what's repetitive, Robert. I think you're being biased here. Like Beyond the Black River has literally people splitting skulls the entire time, and it happens like 20 times, or 30 even times. Here, every single death is awesome. It has a different flavor. You like spasm, don't you? Like, nobody spasmed in Beyond the Black River.
I don't agree, actually. I think if you analyze Beyond the Black River and went through with a pencil on the margin, counting the gore spattered paragraphs and sentences and so, you'd find it well under 50%, or maybe well under.
Well, that's true. Okay, that I will agree with. I thought that, when you were saying repetitive, meaning that the language is repetitive, the fact that it's constant action, is that what you mean?
Oh, the constant action is repetitive. There's, as you say, there's a different sort of gore spatter in all those examples that I've given you. It's just that it's the whole thing is
destruction. Right. So how would you make it better? So what would you this is not a, like, I'm not trying to fight you or something. I'm generally, I think this is an interesting discussion, right? Okay, so because I do this a lot, right? I analyze something and I give ideas. What do we give these Space Marines to do in between these gory scenes? How do we make it better?
Well, you could have them. You could have them having memories, maybe, about their pasts.
Sure, I mean, they've lived for 1,000 years. Maybe they're slowly, like, thinking about, like, although they're killing machines, they're like, I've served for this long, and is this all that there is to it? Like, is this all I am? Like a killing creature of darkness, right? Okay, sure.
Yes, that sort of thing.
Yeah, there was the beginnings of that with Cato Sicarius when he was thinking about, like, this the Space Hulk, this big ship is coming to his world, his original world, right? So there was beginning of that, but didn't really develop. I really am, honestly, I am awestruck in a negative way. Like, I'm baffled that we spend so little with the other Space Marines, with the other company. Why do we set them up to exist there if we're just going to spend most of our time with the first company, right? I thought that it's going to be like, because to me that's why the tension doesn't really work in the story, because we're seeing first company is having a tough fight and whatever in the engine room, but I'm thinking, but there's like another 100 dudes somewhere else in the ship. They can come and help him, right? Like, at the end we find out that they were also preoccupied, but I don't know that at the time, so I'm just like, they can come over and help them out. That's fine. They're here. They hit the stage. But I definitely do agree that the amount of action, like, should be diluted with something else rather than what I first understood you saying as, like, the description was lacking. My apologies.
But also, there's the point that there's what the reader is like comes into it a lot. I'm beginning to think that a lot of good stories can't be read by everybody because not everybody has the right software in their boxes to read all kinds of good story. And for example, I can't get on with most of Charles Dickens, whereas some people are real fans of Charles Dickens. And it's not really that I don't like it that much. I think he's very self-indulgent in style. But also, I can't tell what's going on most of the time in a lot of
He goes into these tirades. I agree completely. Wow. Yes, I also don't really like Charles Dickens. There you go. There's something that we can both be accused of. Not liking Charles Dickens.
Actually, I'm gonna echo Rob. I found this story to be a difficult slog, not just also because of all the jargons that is dropped in. I have to admit, I was physically turned off, like my stomach was turning at parts of.
You usually tell me all about how, like, Western media is not as gory as stuff you've seen from Japanese people. Is this not what you want?
I think the only thing I said about Japanese horror was that they rely a lot. Was that they rely a lot more on psychological horror than jump scares. That I think that's the only thing I said about.
Really? Okay. I thought we had a discussion about Berserk. Where you were talking about how gory that is and how impactful that was. But maybe I'm misremembering.
So for me, reading this, it was just it was like going into watching that Ice Dead Alive, I think that's the name of the Peter Jackson movie, the Sumatran red monkey, where it's just gore after gore after gore. I mean, it's basically a library of special effects, and people go in to watch the special effects. But when I was watching it, I was like, oh my god, this is getting a little bit too much for me. And so I think I'm not wired that way, exactly like Rob described. I think, like, some of the description, like 1 or 2 or 3, and I agree with you, Nikki, the descriptions were really good. But it after, like,
please steal me kind of good. Yes, sir, go on.
But after so many, and it's quite relentless, it did make me physically uncomfortable. Yeah.
Okay, damn. Making XJ physically uncomfortable. I think that's an achievement. Honestly.
That's probably that's completely right, Mr. McNeill. You did great. Yeah, you can be proud of.
You've made me uncomfortable. Thank you.
You earn your lifetime achievement award. No, I'm just kidding.
Robert, you're itching.
Yeah, it's worse in my case in that I actually couldn't follow what was going on very well because the if you like the vividness of the action distracted me from understanding who was doing what and what they were there for and everything. I would have liked to have been let into the whole thing more gently. I know the story isn't a gentle story, but I would have appreciated the background being built up a bit more so that I knew.
Well, there was hold on. There was this like, little Star Wars like thing at the beginning which explained the universe. Was that not gentle enough for you? You wanted some more information on the?
I don't know.
Is that what?
I'm not sure about that. I'm thinking of not so much the universe as a whole as the particular expedition being mounted.
Oh, you wanted it. You know what? I completely agree with you. So I see what you mean. So at the beginning, there could have been like a discussion between Agamemnon and Sicarius being like, okay, there's this ship called Final Absolution, and we need to get to it because it's going this way, right? Like, and then they get into. Yeah, I agree. I think the story would benefit from not starting from like 100%, which is the opposite of what we said of City of Skulls, right? But the City of Skulls slows down immediately after the first big action, and this story doesn't slow down that much, if at all.
So on this, I disagree with both of you.
Okay.
I mean, so this short story is action-packed. It's end-to-end action. I have no problems with that. And I think it's done in a really terrific manner. Because first of all, the paragraphs are not overly long, the sentences are not overly long, so they are very short and punchy, and they get the point across, and that is good pacing. That is the equivalent of quick cuts in a movie. You don't really, unless you have a real really solid intention behind a long shot in a battle scene. You don't want to stay on something for too long, because long shots slows down the tempo, and I feel like long paragraphs also slows down the tempo in the book. And and I think like the whole thing was done really well. Like the tempo was really well maintained all throughout. I also really like the fact that they don't really have that much time to explore their emotions, because when bullets are flying all around you and explosions are happening everywhere, you don't really have the time to do that. I cannot imagine going into a self-reflective mode when grenades are popping off all around you. I just don't think that is realistic, and it's just really strange whenever some authors would pull off a long internal monologue in the middle of arrows flying everywhere. So I think it's also not that Mr. McNeill had neglected that. He's found spots within the short story itself to explore some of that, like when he jumped to, what's the guy's name? Agamemnon? No, Agamemnon.
I called him Agamemnon. That's the way I read it.
Agamemnon. All this Roman and Greek names, man. When he jumped to Agamemnon, man, whatever. He did properly build up that guy. We went into a little bit of his history. We know he's got no chest cavity anymore, and the sort of psychic scars he had, which becomes really relevant later when the hive mind did his psychic attack, and his relationship between him and the librarian. I thought those were nice build up in the right spot. It's so I feel like just on that alone, just like so on the craftsmanship side of things, I think Mr. McNeill has done a terrific job. He's got a really nice template going. Yeah, he's gotten the flow down. He puts the sauce where it needs to be. The nature of the story itself is a little bit on the spicy side, so I can't really argue with that. And I have to be honest, the very vivid nature of the gore did turn me off. But yeah, just on that, on the pacing, yeah, the place where he puts all this stuff, I think is no criticisms from me, and that's my more than 2 cents.
There you go. That was pretty good. Very out there. So I'll tell you something a little bit more personal regarding Graham McNeill and Warhammer 40k works in general. Something quite dear and near to my heart. So my father and I, we have not a lot of things in common when it comes to things that we like. Except for one thing. My father really likes action. He loves action. And he watches action movies a lot. He watches a lot of like TV dramas about that, and he likes to watch History Channel when there's something to do with conflicts and whatever, right? And so I bought myself an omnibus of 3 stories by Graham McNeill, and that was the first 3 novels in Warhammer that I read. And the first one was Nightbringer, I think. There was also a short story, Chain of Command, in there somewhere, but I don't remember that as well. But the Nightbringer is about spoilers for an old book. The character of Ultramarines as well, of the 4th Company, Uriel Ventress, and his fight against the odds, as well as this powerful Necron, which is basically Terminators from the Terminator movie, but with huge green scythes and fantastical, 40,000 years in the future weaponry. It doesn't really matter. The point is, there's a lot of action, and Uriel Ventress becomes a character throughout the story. He actually develops. And that was the only book my father and I read, not only both, but at the same time. And we could actually have discussions with one another about the book, about this work. And we continued also reading it. So I'd read the next book and he would read it after me, and then we'd have a conversation about it. And that was the only time in my life when a passion of mine, which is writing, and my father interconnected and had a connection between me and him, and we could have these conversations, we could have these moments where he and I were on the same page about something. So to me, there's something very special about the works of Graham McNeill, because they hold this very personal thing in my mind. Especially the 3rd book in that omnibus, because both I and my father were very shocked at the the direction which that place went, and how interesting and disgusting and fascinating the planet that Ventures was on that book. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is, I think so. There's this ongoing narrative by Mr. Gibson here, who says about reading things wrong and reading things right, and whether or not we agree with this baloney, that doesn't matter. What I will.
Did you just say baloney?
Yes, I did say baloney. As a little snipe to Robert. I don't think it's complete baloney. I just think the terminology is terrible. The point I'm trying to make is, there's certain things, there's certain parts of the universe that pull you one way or the other, which make it impossible for you not to read something in a correct manner or an incorrect manner. Some things are just a calling of the soul, and it's so impossible to predict whether or not you will be able to read something and have a positive experience because of life, because of individuality, because of these existential things. Perhaps maybe I wouldn't like the Warhammer universe this much, and I wouldn't like the stories of Mr. McNeill this much if I didn't have this very personal and very thoughtful connection because of it, right? But does it really matter? Does it make the work less or better because it could create this interconnection in our dimensional meat space? I don't know. I don't know if you could attribute it to Mr. McNeill's writing, or if you could attribute it to random chance. I really don't know. If you know, that's a very hard thing to say. The only thing I know is it gave me hundreds of hours of joy that I would probably never have if I never read those 3 books.
Then I think they are great books.
Yeah. What you're implying, I think, Nikki, is that the usual duo of reader and book, or perhaps the trio of reader, book, and author, needs to be expanded to reader, book, author, and life circumstance. If you see what I mean.
Yes, so exactly. Actually, that is a great point.
They all come together to create something called a reading. And they've all got to be there for the reading to take place properly.
But that's what's beautiful about universes in which there's more than one book and more than one author. Because in this day and age, I mean, even before that, you could go to book clubs, right, and stuff. But here, you have dedicated people who really are into this universe, and that's mostly what they consume, right? So when you read something, you're not just reading it and then you sit it down on the table and you think about it. You can go on Reddit, you can go on Twitter, you can go to Google Plus no longer exists, you can go to another place, and you can have these discussions with individuals internationally, and but maybe you won't have the same flowering existential like bliss that I had because I finally had something to talk with my dad about, but you will definitely have these moments where maybe even the work wasn't as good as you remember, let's say. Although I've been rereading Nightbringer after we started Two Kinds of Cool, still love it, still great novel. I'm not trying to make any points about that work. I'm just saying that, like, it is much more enhanced because there's so many people that you can discuss it with.
How many do you think by now?
Millions. I'd say millions. Say millions across the world read these stories because it's within the franchise of Warhammer 40,000. Now, contributors, I would say there's close to 1,000 authors in the Warhammer 40,000 universe.
How do they keep consistent with one another?
Yeah, that's a good point. So there's a centralized thing called the Black Library, and they have these, they have contracts with Games Workshop, which is the company that owns Warhammer 40,000, and then they have series, and different series are handled by different authors. So, for example, Graham McNeill is the Ultramarine guy. He is the one who writes about them mostly, right? You have somebody who is only writing about Iron Warriors or something, right? And so on and so forth. But then you have these fantastical things, which are called anthologies. And there's an anthology called the Horus Heresy. And the Horus Heresy, what's so interesting about it is that it's a story about the story. It's a prequel to the entire universe of the Warhammer 40,000. It tells you how we got from really good to this, right? So how we got from a good empire of man, stable empire of mankind to this terrible event. And each book that is written in that series is written by a different author. And the way they keep consistent is you cannot, like, you have to read all of the anthology. And when you're writing the next one, you can't contradict anything you wrote, anyone else wrote, unless you speak with that author and you're like, okay, I have a twist. What if this guy didn't die and now he's coming back, right? And only with his consent and with you collaborating can you do that. I find it very interesting projects.
Usually when you have a situation where people are contributing to a franchise, there will be a licensing arm of the company set up to deal with stuff like this.
Yeah, there's also that. I was more talking about the Horus Heresy specifically.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm just giving the more business side of things, because so you have a licensing arm that has a codex. Whatever it is they call it internally, that's like the library or whatever, and then there will actually be a guy whose job is to make sure nothing contradicts the established law. And if there is, and it's not like authors have no room to experiment and write whatever they want. Sometimes the companies do allow that, although things like that are usually not particularly sanctioned, and you run the risk of having that whatever it is that you've written voided with like an announcement from the licensing company, as we have witnessed in the extended universe when Lucasfilm changed hands.
Yeah, they basically called all of the previous stories in Star Wars like legacy, right?
Yeah,
like legacy stories.
The extended
and everything
universe,
new was,
which to me was a shame, because there are a lot of very, very good stuff in the extended universe.
There's also a lot of shit though. Sorry.
I mean,
there's
so I want there's an artist. When I was a fledgling artist, there's this line. I don't even remember who said it, but it's became my mental, moral, whatever support you want to call it, throughout my entire career. You have thousands of bad drawings in you. Just get them out of the way to get to the good ones. You can't have good art without doing a lot of bad shit. Yeah, just gotta live with it, man. And so yes, there are a lot of bad shit, but that is precisely why there are also a lot of gems in the extended universe. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, Robert, I think you told us that you would say something good about the story, but I still haven't heard it.
Well, really, the good thing about it is that it obviously must be good.
It ends.
I trust a good reader to know what he's talking about. So I trust you to know what you're talking about. It's like if I were a blind man and you were describing something that looked really good, I would trust that you knew what you were talking about.
Right. Fair enough.
I'm not being sarcastic, you know.
I know. No, I understand. I understand what you mean. It's exactly the same way I felt, with they, because at the beginning I basically prefaced it like, I know you like this guy, so I'm sure there's something here, but I just, I can't. It's awful.
It's different stories are going to hit people different ways.
For sure.
Well, like with this particular story, my stomach turned, and that's not a critique of the writer, but just the dish itself is not really to my palate. And
I understand.
And I don't have an issue with Charles Dickens, but I do have an issue with Victor Hugo, for instance. Like I was like, man, this guy is just milking it for all it's worth. Was my thought, but gotta admit, everything was very well written.
I really enjoy the vocabulary in the story. I think the vocabulary is very high standard, especially for modern authors, because there's a lot you read a lot of authors that sort of have like repetitive sentences, but here a lot of like a lot of good vocabulary is used to describe different situations, and really, it gives you a vivid image, which is what I enjoy a lot.
I have a small nitpick with that.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I find the constant use of bio to be very funny.
Biostasis, bioengineered,
bio excretion, bio-organic, and I'm thinking to myself,
I think that comes from the territory, unfortunately, of us dealing with Tyranids. And do you know Zerg from
yes,
StarCraft?
yes, but let me get to my point. Seeing the word bio, the way the word bio is used in this short story, I don't know if it's the same anywhere else in the rest of Warhammer universe, but in this particular story itself, it feels a lot like a marketing guy putting the word organic on every single thing. It's like organic as opposed to what? Rock peas made of rock, peas made of metal. Food is categorically organic. So when you put bio and organic together, that makes zero sense. Bio excretion, I'm sorry, most excretions are organic and biological.
Yeah. It's like offering free gifts. Well, what kind of gift is not free?
Yeah, exactly. So my small nitpick on the word bio.
Oh, here we go. I mean, let's go into a deep philosophical
tangent
discussion.
on bio.
I don't. No, not bio. I don't think any gift is truly free.
Oh, we're going that way, huh?
So I think like even a gift given of pure of heart to somebody else is because that somebody else has given them positive energy that they have received, and now they want to return something. Right? So it's still not really truly free. I think the only quote-unquote free gift is like tax rebates, because they really don't want to give you that, right? So everything else is kind of like, there's some reason behind it.
You kind of have to work for a tax rebate too,
Yes, but I'm saying like, universal ones where like they just have to give it because something has gone wrong, right? Yeah. These happen sometimes, Once in a blue moon you get lucky.
But I think the spirit of what Rob is trying to say is a gift, and free together with gift.
Right.
It's redundant.
That's why I said like, okay, this is like let's go.
Wait. That's actually a word to describe that kind of stuff.
Oxymoron.
Tautology.
Yes, that's it. Tautology.
What's an oxymoron then? What am I thinking?
Oxymoron is like when Milton in Paradise Lost described hell as darkness visible. If it's visible, it's not dark. But he was putting two things together which superficially contradict each other, but a synthesis emerges, a new meaning.
One of my very first short stories was called Edge Round Stars. So I guess edge round is kind of an oxymoron. Because how can an edge be round?
Well, the edge of a plate is round, isn't it?
Yeah, an edge can be round.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, edge can describe two things. One is
that's true. Yeah. But I mean it more in the sense of like a
straight line meeting like a straight line. Yeah. That is an edge,
yeah.
But also it also can mean the peripheral. The circumference,
the edge, the edge
very
of
end
the edge of
something.
Around, yeah.
So that is not an oxymoron. You failed.
Well, and not the first time, probably not the last time. All right.
Well, we're coming up to an hour, so I guess that we will have our last words. What was it that you were trying to say, Nikki? Sorry.
I wish. I almost wish we'd picked a different story by Graham McNeill, because I think what I was trying to do two things at the same time. I was trying to introduce a very typical Warhammer 40,000 story, and I was also trying to introduce an author that I like. And I don't necessarily think that Two Kinds of Fool is one of his best works, right? I think it's still an alright work. I have nothing against it, but I do believe that he has a different short story that I thought of in the middle of this podcast as we were doing this. That would be better, but. What's done is done. If we ever get to it, we might get to it. My point is,
I'm sure we can put that down on the list one of these days.
Somewhere, yeah. But what I was trying to say is, I think, if not a great introduction to Graham McNeill, in my opinion, at least, I think he's done better. This is, as far as it gets. This is the typical current Warhammer 40,000 story. That's how they usually go. There's a lot of action, a lot of gore, a lot of explosions, a lot of lore, and what's it called? Some sort of a, showcase of then this is what this was about.
Well, now there's a different. Maybe we have to go a little bit lighter on the lore, gore, not law, gore.
Gore. That's the one that I was thinking about is about two individuals talking in a church. By Graham McNeill. It has almost no gore whatsoever, so it's a pretty good story. Anyway, it's called The Last Church. Anyway, and this is when I found out it wasn't written by Graham McNeill and my entire world explodes, but I think that it was written by him. Anyway, final point on Two Kinds of Fool before I give it a rating. There is another story, a longer one, which takes on a Space Hulk. Takes place on Space Hulk, and it's actually called Space Hulk. It's written by Gal Thorpe, and I wish that story was written by Graham McNeill, because Graham McNeill would have made it much better. That thing is almost unreadable, except for like 10, 20 paragraphs where it gets good and you enjoy it, and then it's back to pain and suffering. So I really wish that Graham McNeill got the assignment to write Space Hulk instead of Gav Thorpe. My final score for Two Kinds of Fool is 7 out of 10. There you go, 7 out of 10. That's my final score. It was a battle, but it's 7 out of 10. Robert, well, your final thoughts.
I'm going to do a bit of a cop out. I'm going to give it 2 scores. I'm going to give it 10 out of 10 for action and 0 out of 10 for suspense, because there wasn't any room for any suspense, because things were happening all the time. And
so that on average gives it a 5 out of 10, I guess.
Yeah, like with these Star Wars sequences where all that's happening is zap, 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 explosion, explosion, explosion. I get bored with that sort of thing, no matter how good it is, no matter how skillfully it's done.
Right. Not enough. Not enough Conan. Too much barbarian. I understand.
Well, I mean, Conan. The Conan stories are perfectly balanced, in my opinion.
Well, that's what I said, right? Not enough Conan. Too much barbarian. Right?
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Yeah. All right, AJ. What's your?
Yeah, I'll give it an 8 out of 10.
Oh.
It's not my cup of tea, and I would not pick up the story if I knew what I was gonna get into, But I tend to judge things based on their technical execution on stuff like this. Subjective things like too much gore, that's on me. So absolutely, if you're into that kind of stuff, dear readers, this is a great piece of short story to get into. So 8 out of 10, but I won't pick it up if I had a choice.
All right, awesome. Well, I think that about does it. Thank you, dear listeners, for checking in one more time. Hope you enjoyed tonight's discussion, and if you have something to say about the story or anything that we talked about, there's always the comments down below. Like, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Join our Twitter parade on the street with Roll of a Tangent written on your forehead. Whatever you'd like to do in order to support us, we always appreciate it.
Well, a literary discussion is not complete without more viewpoints. So please, I echo Nikki's words. Leave comments and tell us what you think, and Subscribe if you like the podcast and all of that. Goodbye from me. And Rob, do you have any last words?
Not really, no, except I am genuinely sorry. I couldn't be more positive about the story.
I forgive you, Robert. I forgive you.
All right. Well, thanks for giving us your attention. Good day.